The lazy coworker who irritates you is delivering a message you've been avoiding. So is the boss who never sees your effort. Every person who shows up in your working life is wearing a mask, and behind that mask is your own consciousness, reading lines you wrote without realizing it. By the time you finish this, you'll understand why the people draining your energy at work are the clearest mirror you've ever been handed. Neville Goddard said it plainly. Everyone is you pushed out, not the people you love. Everyone. The colleague who cuts corners, the manager who micromanages, the client who never pays on time. They aren't separate forces acting against you. They're projections of states living inside your own awareness, dressed up in faces and names. This is hard to swallow at first. Your mind rebels. You want to say the slacker on your team has nothing to do with you. You followed the rules. You stayed late. You earned your exhaustion. And yet there he is, day after day, doing the bare minimum while you carry the weight. So why does he keep appearing? Because somewhere in your lives, an assumption about effort, fairness and what you're owed. Let's sit with that because it's uncomfortable. When you feel resentment towards someone who isn't pulling their weight, look at what the resentment assumes. It assumes that hard work goes unrewarded. It assumes that others get away with what you can't. That assumption is a state of consciousness, and Goddard taught that whatever state you occupy will populate your world with evidence. The lazy coworker is the evidence. He's the outpicturing of a belief you've been feeding maybe for years. Now you might be thinking this sounds like blaming yourself for other people's choices. Hold that objection. We'll come back to it, because the answer reshapes everything. Consider how a single working day actually unfolds. You wake already braced for friction. You expect the meeting to run long. You expect your idea to get talked over. And it does. You walk in carrying a state, and the room arranges itself to confirm it. The faces around that conference table are reading from the script your inner conviction handed them. Here's where work ethic becomes spiritual practice instead of mere grinding. Most people think discipline means forcing your body through tasks you dread. Real discipline is governing the state you live in before the day begins. Goddard called it the mental diet. You watch the thoughts you feed, on the way you'd watch what you eat. One bitter thought about an unfair workplace, swallowed and believed, becomes tomorrow's unfair encounter. But how do you change the cast of characters around you? You change the one casting them. There's a man in Goddard's framework who can't catch a break. Every employer overlooks him. Every promotion slides past. He's convinced the world of work is rigged against quiet, diligent people like him. And his world obeys that conviction with cruel precision. The shift doesn't begin when his luck changes. It begins when he stops rehearsing the story that he's invisible. You've probably lived a version of this. That stretch where it felt like no matter how much you produced, recognition went somewhere else. The harder you pushed, the more the universe seemed to shrug. That tight feeling in your chest when someone else's name gets called. What if that entire pattern was a state you'd been wearing like a uniform? The law of assumption says you can change the uniform. Not by pretending, not by slapping a fake smile over real bitterness. By genuinely assuming the feeling of being the person whose work matters, whose effort lands, whose contribution gets seen. You assume it until it feels natural, until it becomes the new normal of your inner life. And then the outer world, which has no choice in the matter, begins to reflect the new assumption back. This is where people stumble. They try it for an afternoon, they visualize the promotion, feel a flicker of hope, and then the same coworker slacks off and the old resentment floods back in. They conclude the whole thing is nonsense. The practice didn't fail them. They abandoned the state before it could solidify. Sustained assumption is the real labor. This is the work ethic nobody talks about, the discipline of holding an inner conviction steady when every external sign still shows the old reality. The world lags. It always lags. The seed is underground long before the first green breaks the soil, and the farmer who digs it up to check is the farmer with no harvest. So, when you assume the new state, and your reality still shows you the lazy colleague, the blind manager, the thankless grind, that's the gap between planting and reaping. Your job in that gap is to remain faithful to the version of you that already has what you want. Let's return to the objection we left hanging. Isn't this just blaming yourself for everything wrong in your workplace? Blame looks backward and drowns you in guilt. This looks at responsibility, which is simply your ability to respond. There's a freedom buried in this teaching that most people miss on the first pass. If the people in your reality are reflecting your consciousness, then you are never at the mercy of the difficult boss or the toxic team. You hold the pen. That freedom comes with a cost, and the cost is comfort. It's far easier to be a victim of your circumstances than the author of them. Victimhood asks nothing of you except complaint. Authorship asks you to change daily in the privacy of your own mind, where no one will applaud the effort. Most people choose the complaint. It's lighter to carry in public. But you didn't come this far to choose the lighter thing. Think about the coworker who irritates you most. Picture his face. Now ask what aspect of yourself he's been mirroring. Maybe his laziness reflects your secret fear that your own effort is pointless. So why bother fully? Maybe his entitlement reflects a part of you that also feels owed. The mirror is rarely flattering, which is exactly why it works. The people who annoy us most are carrying the qualities we've refused to look at directly. And the people you admire? They're you too. The mentor whose composure you envy, the colleague who moves through pressure like water, the leader everyone trusts. They're showing you states already alive within you, waiting to be claimed. You don't admire what you don't contain. Admiration is recognition. So the practice becomes twofold. You withdraw the energy from the states you no longer want to wear, and you deliberately occupy the ones you see reflected in the people you respect. When you catch yourself rehearsing the story of the unfair workplace, you stop. You replace it with the felt sense of being valued, capable, abundant, and opportunity. You do this in line for coffee. You do this in the elevator. You do this in the small dead moments that make up most of a working life. This is the inner work ethic. It's quieter than ambition and far more demanding. Anyone can hustle for a week. Holding a state for months, through every contradicting circumstance, while feeding your mind only what supports the world you're building, that's the discipline that actually moves reality. Watch how it plays out in something small. You send an email and catch yourself reading it 4 times, certain it'll be ignored. That certainty is a state. The ignored reply, when it comes, was already encoded in the dread you carried while typing. Change the man typing, and you change the inbox. The same message, sent from a person who assumes their words carry weight, lands in a world arranged to receive them. People resist this most when life is genuinely hard, and that resistance deserves respect. When the bills are real and the boss is genuinely difficult, telling yourself to simply assume a better state can feel like a cruel joke. The teaching answers that honestly. It never asked you to deny the present circumstance. It asked you to stop feeding it with your conviction. You can acknowledge a hard reality and refuse to make it your home. The acknowledgement is honesty. The refusal is the work. There will be days you fail. You'll snap at the slacker. You'll sink back into resentment when the recognition goes elsewhere again. That's allowed. The mental diet survives a single bad meal. It dies only when you decide the diet doesn't work and go back to feasting on bitterness full time. You simply return to the state, again and again. The returning is the practice. And, slowly, the cast changes. Not because you manipulated anyone, because you became someone in whose world those old characters no longer have a role. The lazy coworker gets transferred, or steps up, or simply stops registering in your awareness as a thorn. The blind manager notices, or you find yourself somewhere your work is seen. The reflection shifts because the one being reflected shifted first. Goddard never promised this would be easy. He promised it would be lawful. The same law that gave you the difficult reality will give you the new one, with perfect indifference to which you choose. It only renders, faithfully, whatever state you persist in occupying. So here is what your working life has been trying to tell you all along. Every person who frustrated you was a messenger pointing back at a belief you held about effort and worth. Every person you admired was a preview of who you're capable of becoming. The entire office, the whole grinding theatre of it, was a stage you set with your own assumptions. You can keep reading the old script, the one where hard work goes unseen and others get the breaks. Or you can write a new one tonight, in the only place a new reality is ever drafted, the quiet conviction behind your eyes. The people in your world are waiting for their next lines. Decide what you assume, and they'll have no choice but to read them back to you.